The echoes of absence, awakening to grief's silent storm. Imagine, if you will, a vast ocean at dusk. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and fading gold. The waves, once playful companions to the shore, now retreat into the darkness, leaving behind a beach strewn with remnants of the day, shells cracked open, footprints half erased by the tide. In this moment, the shore stands alone, whispering to the wind of what was lost. This is the landscape of grief, my friend. Not a storm that rages and passes, but a quiet reshaping of the world you once knew. The empty chair at the table becomes a reminder, but also an invitation to rebuild. It sits there, silent and steadfast, a sentinel in the room where laughter once echoed. You've set the table for two out of habit, only to realize the plate across from you will remain untouched. The fork gleams under the kitchen light, mocking the routine that no longer serves. And in that silence, the weight settles in. Not just sorrow, but a profound loneliness that seeps into the cracks of your soul like salt water into sand. Losing a spouse is not merely an end. It is a metamorphosis. It's the unraveling of a tapestry woven over years. Threads of shared dreams, whispered promises, and everyday miracles pulled apart one by one. Yet within this unraveling lies the seed of transformation. Grief is not your enemy, it is your teacher, guiding you through the fog toward a dawn you cannot yet see. But beware the pitfalls along the path, the mistakes that deepen the chasm of isolation, turning solitude into a prison of your own making. In this journey we embark upon together, we will uncover 5 such mistakes that amplify loneliness after the loss of a loved one. These are not judgments, but lanterns held aloft to illuminate the shadows. We draw from the stories of those who have walked this road before, widows and widowers who stumbled, fell, and rose again. Their experiences, blended with timeless wisdom and modern insights, form the backbone of our narrative. For in understanding these errors, we find the keys to unlock healing, resilience, and a renewed sense of connection. Let us begin at the precipice, where the initial shock gives way to the raw reality of absence. The first mistake, isolating yourself in the name of strength. Picture Sarah, a woman in her mid-50s, whose husband Tom passed suddenly from a heart attack after 30 years of marriage. In the days following the funeral, Sarah retreated into her home, a cozy bungalow nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Friends called, offering casseroles and company, but she waved them away with a polite smile. "I need to be strong," she told herself. "I can handle this alone." She buried herself in paperwork, sorting through bills and memories, convinced that vulnerability was a luxury she couldn't afford. But strength, dear listener, is not a solitary fortress. It is a bridge built with the hands of others. In the modern world, where social media parades images of unbreakable resilience, hashtags like #stay strong and filtered photos of solo triumphs, we are seduced into believing that grief is a private battle. Yet this isolation only deepens the loneliness. Psychologically, humans are wired for connection. Our brains release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, in the presence of supportive others. When we withdraw, we deprive ourselves of this natural balm, allowing cortisol, the stress hormone, to flood our systems unchecked. Sarah's days blurred into nights of endless scrolling through old photos on her phone, each image a dagger of regret. "Why didn't I tell him I loved him more?" she'd whisper to the empty room. The house, once filled with Tom's booming laugh and the aroma of his weekend barbecues, now echoed with her solitary footsteps. Financial decisions loomed. Should she sell the car they bought together? What about the retirement accounts tangled in bureaucracy? But she tackled them alone, second-guessing every choice in the silence. Spiritually, isolation robs us of the communal rituals that have sustained humanity through loss for millennia. Think of ancient mourning practices, the Irish wake, where stories and songs honor the departed, or the Jewish Shiva, where community gathers to sit in quiet solidarity. In our hyper-individualistic society, we forget these anchors, opting instead for self-imposed exile. But as the poet John Donne reminds us, no man is an island. To isolate is to deny the interconnected web of life, where your pain is shared, lightened by the empathy of others. And so the loneliness festers. It manifests in neglected health, skipped meals turning into unintended fasting, walks foregone for the comfort of the couch. Depression creeps in, a shadow that lengthens with each unanswered call. Sarah found herself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., anxiety twisting her thoughts into knots of what ifs and if onlys. The regret piled up like unopened mail, regret for not reaching out, for not allowing others to see her tears. But there is a way through. The antidote to this mistake lies in small, intentional steps toward connection. Start with a single phone call to a trusted friend, not to unload your burdens, but to simply say, I'm here and I miss him. Join a support group, online forums like Grief Share or local meetups where stories are exchanged like lifelines. These spaces remind us that loneliness is not unique. It is a shared human experience, a bridge to empathy rather than a barrier. Metaphorically, think of your heart as a garden after a storm. The winds have uprooted the tallest tree, your spouse, but the soil remains fertile. Isolation lets weeds of despair choke the ground, but inviting others in is like calling upon gardeners to help till the earth anew. They bring seeds of hope, water of compassion, and together, new growth emerges. Sarah eventually took that step. One rainy afternoon, she accepted an invitation from her neighbor Ellen for tea. What began as awkward small talk evolved into shared tears and laughter over memories. Ellen, who had lost her own partner years prior, offered practical advice on navigating insurance claims, easing the financial fog that had clouded Sarah's mind. In that connection, Sarah felt the first stirrings of resilience, a quiet strength born not from solitude, but from solidarity. As we move deeper into this narrative, remember, avoiding isolation doesn't mean erasing your grief. It means sharing its weight so you can carry it forward with grace. Now let us turn to the second mistake, neglecting your physical and emotional health in the pursuit of normalcy. Envision Mark, a retired engineer in his 60s, whose wife Linda succumbed to a prolonged battle with cancer. In the wake of her passing, Mark threw himself into routine, mowing the lawn at dawn, grocery shopping with military precision, even resuming his weekly golf games with buddies. Life goes on, he'd say with a forced grin, echoing the platitudes society thrusts upon the bereaved. But beneath the facade, his body rebelled. Sleepless nights led to chronic fatigue, and skipped doctor visits masked a rising blood pressure. This mistake stems from a cultural myth that grief has a timeline, a neat progression from denial to acceptance, after which we snap back to normal. In reality, grief is a spiral, looping through emotions without warning. By neglecting self-care, we invite loneliness to take root in our very bones. Physically, the stress of loss suppresses the immune system, increasing vulnerability to illness. Emotionally, unaddressed pain festers into depression, where every mirror reflects not just your face, but the hollow eyes of regret. Mark's story illustrates the modern challenges. In a world of hustle culture, where productivity is prized above all, pausing for self-care feels like defeat. He ignored the ache in his chest, dismissing it as just grief, until a minor heart scare landed him in the ER. There, alone in the sterile room, the loneliness hit like a tidal wave. Regret for not honoring Linda's memory by caring for the body she once cherished. Spiritually, neglecting health dishonors the sacred vessel that carries our soul through life. Ancient wisdom, from Ayurvedic practices to biblical exhortations to honor your body as a temple, reminds us that healing begins within. Yet in our era of instant gratification, apps promising quick fixes for everything from fitness to mindfulness, we often overlook the slow, deliberate work of nurturing ourselves. The psychological impact is profound. Loneliness amplifies anxiety, creating a feedback loop where fear of the future paralyzes action. Mark found himself avoiding social gatherings, convinced his weakness would burden others. Depression whispered lies. You're alone because you're broken. Harsho. But the hidden lesson here is clarity, the realization that health is the foundation upon which renewal is built. Practical tools abound for countering this mistake. Begin with journaling. Each evening, pen 3 gratitudes and one small act of self-kindness, like a warm bath or a nourishing meal. Incorporate movement, gentle walks in nature, where the rhythm of your steps syncs with the heartbeat of the world. Seek professional support. Therapy isn't a sign of failure, but a bridge to understanding. Cognitive behavioral techniques can reframe regrets, turning "I should have" into "I can now." Metaphorically, view your health as a lighthouse amid the storm of grief. Neglect dims its beam, leaving you adrift in foggy loneliness. But tending to it, fueling the light with rest, nutrition, and compassion, guides you safely to shore, where healing awaits. Mark discovered this through a support group, where sharing his struggles led to accountability partners. They encouraged him to schedule checkups, prepare healthy meals together via video calls, and even meditate on Linda's favorite memories. In reclaiming his health, Mark honored her love, transforming loneliness into a quiet companion rather than a tormentor. As we pause here in our journey, reflect on these first two mistakes: isolation and neglect. They are sirens calling you deeper into despair, but with awareness, you can steer clear. Ahead lie more revelations, but for now, breathe. You are not alone in this vast ocean. The stars above are maps drawn by those who've navigated before. Yet grief's transformation demands we confront the financial quagmires that often ensnare the bereaved, leading us to the third mistake: making hasty financial decisions driven by fear. Consider Elena, a vibrant artist in her 40s, left widowed when her husband Javier died in a car accident. Overwhelmed by mounting bills and the void in their shared bank account, Elena rushed to sell their home, a sanctuary of painted walls and garden dreams, to downsize and simplify. In her panic, she accepted a low offer, only to regret it months later when the market rebounded, leaving her in a cramped apartment that amplified her isolation. This mistake is all too common in our fast-paced economy, where financial insecurity looms like a perpetual cloud. Loss disrupts not just the heart, but the wallet. Life insurance payouts delayed by red tape, joint accounts frozen in probate, unexpected debts surfacing like ghosts. Driven by fear, we make impulsive choices, liquidating assets, ignoring budgets, or burying our heads in denial, deepening loneliness by creating instability that isolates us further. Psychologically, fear activates the amygdala, our brain's alarm system, overriding rational thought. In grief, this leads to catastrophizing, where every bill feels like an avalanche. Regret follows, a bitter companion whispering of lost security. Socially, financial strain can strain relationships. Elena distanced herself from friends, ashamed of her mistakes, turning inward to nurse her wounds alone. Spiritually, hasty decisions betray the wisdom of patience, a virtue extolled in traditions from Buddhism's mindful waiting to Christianity's be still and know. Money, after all, is energy, a flow that, when mishandled, blocks the path to renewal. The hidden lesson? Clarity emerges from chaos when we pause, assess, and seek guidance. Practical steps include consulting a financial advisor specialized in bereavement. Many offer pro bono sessions through nonprofits. Create a grief budget. Allocate funds for self-care alongside necessities. Use apps like Mint to track expenses without overwhelm. Journal financial fears, transforming them into actionable plans. Metaphorically, finances are the roots of your life's tree. Uprooting them hastily in storm winds leaves you toppled. Nurturing them with care ensures you stand tall, branches reaching toward new light. Elena learned this by joining a widow's financial workshop, where shared stories demystified the process. With expert help, she rebuilt her stability, renting out a room to combat loneliness and fund art classes that rekindled her spirit. As we delve further, remember, these mistakes are not endpoints, but detours on the road to healing. The fourth mistake beckons: clinging to regret and what-ifs, forgetting to honor the past while embracing the future. Visualize David, a teacher in his 50s, whose wife, Rachel, passed from illness. Nights found him replaying arguments, missed anniversaries, the should-haves that haunted like specters. "If only I'd been more attentive," he'd lament, his journal filled with self-recrimination rather than celebration of their love. This fixation isolated him, pushing away children who wanted to share joyful memories. Regret is grief's sharp edge, cutting deeper in solitude. In modern life, with its emphasis on perfection, social media reels of idyllic marriages, we amplify past flaws, ignoring the beauty. Psychologically, this rumination fuels depression, trapping us in a loop where loneliness thrives on self-doubt. Spiritually, clinging to regret dishonors the soul's journey, where every experience teaches. The Bhagavad Gita speaks of detachment from fruits of action. Similarly, releasing regret frees us to honor love's legacy. The lesson? Wisdom blooms from reflection, not obsession. Practical tools. Regret rituals. Write letters of forgiveness to yourself and the departed. Burn them symbolically. Practice mindfulness meditation to anchor in the present. Share stories in therapy or groups, reframing regrets as growth points. Metaphorically, regret is a rearview mirror. Glance back for lessons, but drive forward lest you crash into isolation's wall. David broke free by creating a memory box with his kids, photos, letters, trinkets that celebrated Rachel. In honoring the past, he opened to future connections, volunteering at her favorite charity, where new friendships eased his loneliness. Finally, the fifth mistake, avoiding new beginnings out of loyalty to the lost love. Think of Sophia, a librarian in her late 40s, widowed young. She shunned dates, hobbies, even travel, fearing it betrayed her husband, Alex. "How can I move on when he's gone?" she'd ask the empty shelves. This loyalty, while noble, morphed into stagnation, her world shrinking to echoes of the past. In our sentimental society, moving on is misconstrued as forgetting. But true loyalty honors by living fully. Psychologically, avoidance breeds anxiety, loneliness echoing in unlived moments. Spiritually, it's a denial of life's cycle, birth, death, rebirth. The hidden gift, inner strength from integrating loss into a new narrative. Tools: set, honor goals. Pursue dreams in their name. Join clubs for shared interests. Therapy helps redefine loyalty as evolution. Metaphorically, love is a river. Damming it for the past starves the future. Let it flow and it nourishes new shores. Sophia dipped a toe in by taking a cooking class Alex loved, meeting others who understood. In time, she dated, not replacing, but adding to her story, loneliness, giving way to hope. But wait, our journey is far from over. These mistakes, while illuminating, are but the surface. Deeper still lie the psychological depths, the spiritual awakenings, and the practical paths forward. In the parts to come, we will explore whispers from the depths, navigating the psychological labyrinth of grief, the intricate dance of the mind when confronted with irrevocable loss. For grief, you see, is not a linear path etched in stone, but a labyrinth of the psyche, where every turn reveals a new facet of the self, shadows of doubt, mirrors of memory, and unexpected doorways to unforeseen light. We have named the 5 mistakes that beckon us toward deeper isolation: the solitary fortress of withdrawal, the neglect of our weary bodies, the frantic scramble through financial fog, the chains of regret that bind us to yesterday, and the noble yet paralyzing vigil against new horizons. These are the snares, familiar to so many who grieve in silence. But to truly honor this journey, we must descend further into the psychological undercurrents that swirl beneath these surface errors. Here in the quiet recesses of the mind, loneliness does not merely accompany grief, it reshapes it, amplifying every echo until the soul feels adrift in an endless night. Yet even in this darkness, transformation stirs. Grief is not just sorrow's heavy cloak, it is the alchemist's fire, burning away the illusions of permanence to reveal the gold of authentic being. Let us walk this labyrinth together, hand in virtual hand, uncovering the impacts that threaten to engulf us and the resilient sparks that guide us out. Consider the profound psychological imprint of loneliness after losing a spouse. It begins subtly, like the first frost on a window pane, obscuring the view outward. In the immediate aftermath, the brain, that miraculous organ of adaptation, enters a state of hypervigilance. Neuroscientists describe it as complicated grief, where the amygdala, the sentinel of fear, fires relentlessly, flooding the system with cortisol. This is the anxiety that grips at 2 a.m., when the bed feels like a vast, uncharted sea, and every creak of the house whispers of intruders, memories that ambush, regrets that replay like broken films. Loneliness, in this context, is no mere emotion. It is a physiological ache, Studies from the American Psychological Association reveal that chronic isolation post-loss rivals the health risk of smoking 15 cigarettes a day, elevating blood pressure, weakening immunity, and carving neural pathways of despair. For the widowed, this manifests as a profound disorientation. The loss of a spouse severs not just companionship, but a co-pilot in decision-making, a mirror for identity. Who am I, you wonder, without the we that define my days? This identity fracture breeds regret, a cognitive loop where the mind tortures itself with hypotheticals. If only I'd said yes to that trip. Or, what if I'd noticed the signs sooner? These what-ifs are the mind's attempt to regain control in chaos, but they only deepen the chasm, turning inward reflection into self-flagellation. Draw from the story of Liam, a software developer in his early 40s, whose wife, Nora, was taken by a sudden aneurysm during a family hike. In the months that followed, Liam's world contracted to his home office, screens glowing like false suns in the dim light. Social media, that double-edged sword of modern connectivity, became his unwitting tormentor. Scrolling through feeds of couples' vacations and anniversary posts, he felt the sting of exclusion, a digital ghost at the feast. Everyone else has moved on, he'd think, ignoring the curated illusion. His anxiety spiraled. Panic attacks at the grocery store, where aisles once navigated together now loomed like mazes. Regret shadowed him. Why hadn't he turned off his laptop that last evening to join her on the couch? The financial pressures, too, intertwined with this mental maelstrom. Staring at spreadsheets of shared investments, he froze, paralyzed by the fear of erring alone. Liam's isolation amplified these psychological wounds. Without outlets, depression settled like fog over a valley, muting colors and sapping will. Modern challenges exacerbated it. Remote work blurred boundaries between grief and productivity, while pandemic-era habits of solitude lingered, making outreach feel archaic. Spiritually, this phase echoed the dark night of the soul, described by mystics like Saint Therese. John of the Cross, a necessary purging, yet one that, unattended, risks becoming a permanent eclipse. But herein lies the first hidden lesson of grief: clarity amid the storm. When loneliness strips away the distractions of daily partnership, it forces a reckoning with the self. What emerges is not weakness, but unvarnished truth, the realizations long postponed by the rhythm of coupledom. For Liam, therapy unveiled this: sessions with a grief counselor, grounded in acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, helped him label his thoughts as passing clouds rather than defining truths. Regret is a teacher, not a jailer, the counselor said. Through this, Liam glimpsed his inner strength, a quiet reservoir of adaptability honed by years of coding late-night bugs. Psychologically, this shift activates the prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, fostering resilience by reframing loss as a catalyst for growth. Yet the labyrinth twists onward. Anxiety, that relentless companion, often masquerades as practicality, urging hasty decisions to fix the unfixable. In financial realms, it whispers of scarcity, prompting the third mistake we named: rushing into sales or investments without counsel. Emotionally, it fuels social withdrawal, convincing us that vulnerability invites pity. And oh, the regret it cultivates. Regret is grief's most insidious psychological thief, stealing presence from the now. Evolutionary psychologists posit it as a survival mechanism, learning from past errors to avoid future pain. But in bereavement, unbound by time's forward march, it loops eternally. Enter the tale of Aisha, a nurse in her late 50s from a bustling city, widowed when her husband Karim lost his fight with diabetes complications. Aisha's days blurred in the hospital's fluorescent hum, where she poured empathy into patients but starved her own heart. Loneliness crept in through neglected health, caffeine-fueled shifts replacing balanced meals, exhaustion masquerading as fortitude. Her regret centered on unspoken dreams: the family trip to Morocco they'd planned but postponed, the poetry she set aside for his care. "I failed him by not living more boldly," she'd confide to no one, the words dissolving into the steam of solitary teas. This emotional neglect, our second mistake, intertwined with psychological fallout. Depression's veil descended, manifesting in anhedonia, the inability to feel joy, even in simple pleasures like a sunset walk. Modern life, with its cult of busyness, normalized this. Apps tracking steps but not soul steps. Friends texting check-ins that felt like obligations. Aisha's anxiety peaked during quiet evenings, when the apartment's silence amplified every tick of the clock, a metronome to her unraveling. Spiritually, Aisha found solace in Sufi poetry. Rumi's verses on the reed flute's lament. The wound is the place where the light enters you. This hidden lesson, wisdom forged in vulnerability, began to pierce her fog. Through a hospital employee assistance program, she joined a mindfulness group where guided meditations dissolved regret's grip. Breathe into the ache, the facilitator urged, and slowly Aisha did. Journaling became her ritual, pages filled not with blame, but with what nows. Small intentions like planting basil on the windowsill, a nod to Karim's love of cooking. Psychologically, this practice rewires the brain via neuroplasticity, carving paths of compassion over criticism. As we navigate these depths, observe how the mistakes interconnect, a web of psychological threads. Isolation begets anxiety, which hastens financial missteps, which breed regret, which stifles health, which in loyalty's name halts new beginnings. Yet each knot holds a lesson. Inner strength, that phoenix rising from ashes, reveals itself not in absence of pain, but in its embrace. Resilience research from the labs of positive psychology underscores this. Post-traumatic growth occurs in 70% of bereaved individuals who engage actively with their grief, emerging with deeper empathy, purpose, and relational bonds. Let us linger on regret's psychology, for it is the bridge between emotional and spiritual realms. Regret thrives in loneliness's vacuum, where unchecked narratives paint us as villains in our own love stories. But flip the script. What if regret is a compass pointing to unlived values? For Javier's widow Elena, from our earlier glimpse, regret over unsaid I love yous evolved into advocacy. She volunteered at a local hospice, sharing stories that bridged her isolation with others' solace. This alchemical turn, psychologically termed meaning-making, transforms suffering into legacy, loneliness into communion. Anxiety, too, carries concealed gifts. It alerts us to unmet needs, perhaps the social hunger masked as self-sufficiency. In group therapy circles, like those offered by the compassionate friends, widows and widowers exchange tales, normalizing the abnormal. My heart races when I dine alone, my one shares. Mine too. Let's eat together next week, another replies. Such connections downregulate the sympathetic nervous system, easing the fight-or-flight grip. Modern challenges weave through this tapestry. The gig economy's instability heightens financial anxiety, while algorithmic feeds algorithmically isolate, curating echo chambers of sorrow. Yet digital tools can counter, apps like Day One for voice-recorded journals, capturing unfiltered grief, or virtual reality grief simulations, allowing safe immersion in memories. Spiritually, these echo ancient practices. The Tibetan Book of the Dead's guidance through Bardo states, mirroring our psychological betwixt and between. Deeper still, depression's shadow tests our mettle. It is the mind's winter, barren yet pregnant with spring. For Mark, the golfer we met, depression arrived as a leaden blanket, muting Linda's remembered laughter. But in exploring its roots, ungrieved layers of their marriage's strains, he unearthed wisdom, forgiveness, for both self and other. Cognitive therapy tools like thought-challenging worksheets helped. Is this regret factor feeling? Often feeling. This discernment fosters clarity, the mind's fog lifting to reveal contours of a redefined self. And loneliness itself? Ah, the core impact. It is the psyche's cry for mirroring, the soul's echo seeking response. Evolutionary biology frames it as a signal of disconnection from the tribe, urging reconnection. In stories like Sarah's Tea with Ellen, we see it. A single outreach snowballs into community, psychological isolation yielding to belonging's balm. These psychological depths, fraught as they are not graves but gestation chambers. The hidden lessons, clarity to see truths unclouded, wisdom to navigate with seasoned grace, inner strength to stand unbowed, emerge as grief's true bequest. They whisper, You are more than your loss. You are the vessel through which love endures. Yet to fully integrate these revelations, we need bridges, practical tools to span the chasm from knowing to doing. In the chapters ahead, we will forge them. Self-care sanctuaries, communal hearths, the alchemy of words on page. For now, rest in this truth. The labyrinth has no dead ends. Every shadow births a light, forging the path forward, tools for renewal and resilience. Every shadow births a light, and it is in this birthing that we find the tools, the steady hands, the whispered incantations, the deliberate rituals that turn grief's raw ache into a forge of renewal. We have traversed the echoes of absence, naming the 5 mistakes that lure us into loneliness's embrace, the illusion of solitary strength, the dismissal of our body's sacred pleas, the haste born of financial fear, the tether of unrelenting regret, and the vigilant stasis that mistakes loyalty for chains. We have plumbed the psychological labyrinth, where anxiety coils like smoke, depression weighs like winter's first snow, and regret carves canyons in the heart. Yet from these depths the hidden lessons rise, clarity to pierce illusions, wisdom to weigh choices with seasoned grace, inner strength to weather tempests unbowed. Now, dear companion on this road, we arrive at the heart of transformation, the practical arsenal that empowers you to sidestep these snares and reclaim your narrative. These are not grand gestures, but humble instruments. Self-care as daily sacrament, support groups as communal hearth, journaling as soul's unburdening, small steps as the bridge from paralysis to possibility. They address the emotional tempests, the practical quagmires, the spiritual yearnings of modern widowhood, where isolation lurks in empty inboxes, financial apps chime unmet alerts, and the siren call of Netflix numbs the call to connect. Woven through these tools are the stories of those we've met: Sarah, Mark, Elena, Aisha, Liam, Sophia, David, now rising not as cautionary echoes, but as beacons of what's possible. For in wielding these, grief becomes not a thief of joy, but a sculptor of deeper life. Let us begin with the cornerstone: self-care, that oft-forgotten right which counters the second mistake of neglect and ripples through all others. In the whirlwind of loss, the body becomes both battlefield and sanctuary, a vessel adrift yet brimming with untapped vitality. Self-care is no indulgence. It is rebellion against despair's erosion, a deliberate tending that honors the love once shared by stewarding the self that remains. Envision it as a quiet revolution in the mundane, the morning ritual that Sarah, our bungalow sentinel, reclaimed after her retreat into isolation. No longer did she greet the day with coffee scalding her throat in haste. Instead, she instituted Linda's Legacy Mornings, named Riley after Mark's wife, but adopted as her own. A simple sequence: 5 minutes of deep breathing by the window, inhaling the scent of dew-kissed earth, a journal entry not of woes, but of one sensory delight from the prior day, a bird's trill, the warmth of sunlight on skin, followed by a nourishing breakfast, perhaps oatmeal swirled with berries, evoking Tom's barbecue sweetness in a gentler form. This wasn't about erasing absence, but anchoring presence, countering the depression that had blurred her days into grayscale. Psychologically, self-care recalibrates the nervous system, lowering cortisol through practices rooted in somatic experiencing. Body-centered therapy that teaches us to track tension and release it like exhaling a held breath. In our screen-saturated era, where doom scrolling at midnight deepens anxiety's grip, apps like Calm or Insight Timer offer guided sessions tailored to grief. 10-minute body scans that map loneliness not as enemy, but as signal. A tightness in the chest crying for touch, be it a self-hug or a weighted blanket's embrace. For the financial fray, self-care extends to sanctuary budgeting. Elena's innovation after her hasty home sale. She allocated a modest renewal fund, not for luxuries but for soul nourishment, a monthly massage to unknot regrets knots, or wildflower seeds for a balcony garden, symbolizing growth from loss's soil. This practical pivot transformed fear into foresight. Consulting free resources like the National Foundation for Credit Counseling's bereavement modules she learned to pause before decisions, scheduling reflection weeks where no major moves occur. Spiritually, it echoed the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, embracing imperfection as beauty, reminding her that healing flourishes in the cracks, not despite them. Modern challenges demand adaptive tools. For the remote worker like Liam, whose office became a grief cocoon, self-care meant boundary rituals, end-of-day walks sans phone, syncing steps with podcasts on post-traumatic growth, like Brené Brown's Tales of Vulnerability as Superpower. Neglecting health no longer, he tracked sleep with a simple journal tally, aiming for 7 hours, discovering that rest birthed clarity, dissolving what-if fog. And for Aisha, the night shift nurse, it was shift sanctuaries. Pre-work herbal teas infused with Kareem's favorite mint, a meditative pause that bridged exhaustion and empathy, preventing burnout's lonely spiral. Metaphorically, self-care is the gardener's glove on calloused hands. It shields while it works the earth, turning fallow fields into bounties. Through it, the body whispers back, energy returning like spring's first green shoots, loneliness softening from vice to veil. From this personal fortification, we extend to communal hearths, support groups, the antidote to isolation's first mistake, and a bulwark against all ensuing shadows. In a world where fine is the loneliest four-letter word, uttered in Zoom calls or grocery checkouts, these gatherings are lifelines, spaces where masks dissolve and stories interlace like vines on a trellis. Sophia, our shelf-guarding librarian, discovered this in the unlikeliest haven, a virtual book club for widows, hosted by Modern Loss, blending literature with lived truth. What began as hesitant logins, fearing her young widow status would alienate, unfolded into revelation. Sharing passages from Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking, she voiced the loyalty that stalled her steps. How do I read of new adventures without betraying Alex? Responses flowed, not judgments, but mirrors. Loyalty lives in the living, one peer offered, recounting her own tango lessons in honor of a danced-away spouse. Financial confessions surfaced too, tips on probate navigators from group alums, easing Sophia's unspoken dread. Support groups, whether in person via hospice foundations or online through Reddit's RUR Widowers, a raw, real-time forum pulsing with 24/7 solidarity, foster psychological resilience by normalizing the abnormal. Research from the Journal of Loss and Trauma shows participants report 40% reductions in depressive symptoms as shared narratives activate mirror neurons, forging empathy's neural bridges. For David, regrets captive, the dinner party, a supper club for young grievers, shifted his script. Over potluck meals, he traded if-onlys for remember-whens, co-creating a communal memory quilt. Threads of Rachel's quirks stitched beside strangers' beloveds. This ritual honored the past while threading future possibilities, anxiety yielding to anticipation. Spiritually, these circles revive ancestral wisdom, the African Ubuntu philosophy, I am because we are, or indigenous talking circles, where words travel sunwise, unhurried. In modern isolation, amplified by urban sprawl and app-driven friends, groups counter with tangible touchpoints, hugs at meetups or virtual care packages of playlists curated for heartache. Liam found his tribe in a tech-savvy men's grief cohort, dissecting anxiety's code like bugs in software. Debug the loop, they'd quip, applying CBT frameworks to rewire rumination. Even financial fears found footing. Group referrals to fiduciary advisors specializing in spousal loss demystified IRAs and estates, turning overwhelm into empowerment. Yet entry can daunt, the fear of taking up space in sorrow's economy. Start small, one meeting, anonymous if needed. Observe, then share a single sentence. As trust builds, so does belonging, loneliness metamorphosing from void to village. Complementing community is journaling, the solitary yet sacred tool that bridges inner and outer worlds, directly confronting regret's fourth snare and nurturing wisdom's bloom. It is the pen's alchemy, transmuting chaos into chronicle, where emotional deluges find dry shore. Mark, our routine-bound retiree, wielded this like a divining rod after his ER wake-up. No longer golf logs, his notebook became Linda's ledger, bifurcated pages, left for grief's unfiltered pour, rants at fate, tallies of skipped checkups, right for gratitudes and forward flares, sparks of agency, like, today I chose salad over stress eating. This structure, drawn from expressive writing protocols by psychologist James Pennebaker, accelerates healing. Studies show 20 minutes daily for 4 days halves physician visits for stress-related ills, as narrative coherence soothes the psyche's fractures. For Elena, post-sale regret fueled forgiveness flows. Stream of consciousness entries ending in release prompts. What served then, but burdens now? What blooms from this release? Financial entries evolve too. Pros, cons, lists for decisions, infused with metaphors. Debts as autumn leaves to compost, not hoard. Modern twists abound. Voice-to-text apps for weary nights, or bullet journals with grief-specific trackers. Mood dials, hydration hashes, tackling health neglect head-on. Aisha layered spirituality, Sufi-inspired. Each entry framed as a letter to the divine, regrets offered like rose petals to a river, floating away to reveal inner strength beneath. Spiritually, journaling is prayer in ink, echoing the Psalms' raw cries or Julian of Norwich's revelations in solitude. It counters modern distractions, endless tabs of self-help fluff, by demanding presence, one word at a time. David's practice birthed legacy letters, unsent missives to Rachel, celebrating joys over quarrels, which he read aloud in therapy, regrets chains loosening into wings. Finally, the essence of all tools, small steps forward, the incremental march that dismantles the fifth mistake's stasis, weaving emotional, practical, and spiritual threads into motion. These are not leaps of faith, but pebbles paving the path. Each one a defiance of paralysis, a nod to renewal without erasure. Sarah's first step, a neighborhood stroll, not for exercise but encounter, waving at passers-by, evolving to coffee chats. Financially, it meant one call weekly, to a planner, then a peer mentor. Liam's, coding a grief app prototype, shared in his group, turning isolation's tech into connections code. Sophia's, a solo exhibit of Alex-inspired sketches, inviting 5 friends. Loyalty honored in exposure, not enclosure. These steps address modern hurdles, the overwhelm of options via decision trees, branching sketches in journals, pruning hasty choices. Health-wise, micro-habits, one vegetable daily, one boundary set. Spiritually, honor altars, shelves with mementos beside space for new tokens, symbolizing integration. Metaphorically, small steps are the river's patient carving of canyons, unassuming drips yielding grandeur. Psychologically, they leverage the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished tasks motivate completion, building momentum against depression's inertia. As these tools interlace, self-care fueling steps, groups amplifying journals, all countering mistakes, they birth resilience's quiet roar. Loneliness, once a devouring sea, becomes a navigable bay. Regrets transform to roadmaps, anxiety to alertness, absence to abiding presence. And so we reach the journey's crest, where grief reveals its ultimate grace. Not an end to sorrow, but a path to honoring love's eternal flame while stepping into tomorrow's sun. The empty chair. It invites not just memory, but multiplicity. Friends around the table, new stories etched beside the old. The 5 mistakes, once deepening shadows, now illuminate choices. Connect boldly, care fiercely, decide wisely, release gently, begin bravely. You who listen with a heart acquainted with loss are the alchemist. In every tear shed in community, every breath claimed in solitude, every step taken in love's name, you rebuild. Grief is transformation's forge, loneliness its bellows. Together they temper you into one who loves more wholly, lives more vividly, connects more deeply. Honor the departed not by halting, but by hurtling forward, their light your lodestar. Carry this. The love that bound you does not break in death. It expands, a universe birthed from a star's collapse. Walk on, resilient one. The dawn awaits, and in its light, you are whole.